Terra Nova, a resource-rich world that was colonized by settlers from Earth in 5104 AD, or TN493 using the local calendar. Located in a distant system called Helios, this burgeoning colony world would flourish for close to 1,000 Terra Novan cycles before Earth would make a fateful decision that would forever change the course of history. In TN 1454, the economic strain on Earth to support the colony worlds had reached an unbearable level. Political pressures from within the human Concordat, the ruling government on Earth at the time, forced an abrupt withdrawal of support for the colony worlds, leaving them to fend for themselves, which included Terra Nova. On the planet itself, literal chaos erupted as critical supply lines instantly dried up, and the ruling leadership used their political connections to secure transport off-world. In the north, this in turn led to a massive power vacuum that resulted in many small-scale conflicts between the cities over food and resources. This period of time between TN 1470 to TN 1540 became known to historians as the Reconstruction, as out of the ashes, the foundation for the new order on Terra Nova would be built. Eventually, the cities became exhausted of the continual fighting, and began establishing peace treaties with one another that would eventually evolve into the modern city-states, and inevitably lay the foundation for the Northern Leagues. But the three largest of these new northern factions would still find reasons to fight one another. These three leagues were the Northern Lights Confederacy, NLC, the United Mercantile Federation, UMF, and the Western Frontier Protectorate, WFP. Each of these groups had their own strengths and weaknesses. The Confederacy held steadfast to its official faith of revisionism, while at the same time maintaining a sizable industrial base. The Western Frontier Protectorate would be known for its stubborn individuals and militaristic culture, and the United Mercantile Federation for its massive economic power and business-centric society. The UMF's economic power was inevitably focused on achieving a level of manufacturing capacity that dwarfed all other political players on Terra Nova. With their new might, they became nearly unstoppable in the unending wars against their northern neighbors. Obviously, this turn of events greatly disturbed both the Northern Lights Confederacy and Western Frontier Protectorate, both neither wanting to give up their autonomy to the Federation. In light of this, the two former enemies would join together to form NATO, the Northern Allied Defense Organization. Together, NATO was able to turn the tides against the mercantiles and begin invading UMF territory in earnest. But this military invasion stalled, and eventually failed, though it would lead to a ceasefire between the three powers. However, the leadership of the UMF was concerned. Ceasefires were often temporary things, and the chances of a war being reignited between them and NATO were impossible to ignore. So to ensure the Federation's future victory in such an occurrence, they invested their resources into the newly created bipedal one-man tank project, also known as the B.O.T. project. Before long, a new military paradigm was unleashed upon the world, the Hunter Gear, a fully developed mechanized walker designed for only one purpose: war. Up until this point, mechs on Terra Nova were commonly used for civilian purposes like mining or construction, but this would change everything. Unfortunately for the United Mercantiles, they were not able to keep this new development for themselves. Just before the Hunter would enter full production, a commando team from the Western Frontier Protectorate stole the gear prototype and made off with it. However, in a twist of fate, before the Hunter could be delivered safely into the hands of NATO, commandos from the Southern Republic stole the gear that WFP worked so hard to acquire themselves. The Southern Republic was one of four factions in the southern hemisphere of Terra Nova, which had a political landscape very similar to that in the north, which consisted of an assortment of different leagues that were each made up of a collection of southern city-states. Since the fall of the old Earth-centric order, the Southern Republic was the largest and most aggressive faction in their hemisphere. Fortunately, or unfortunately, in the long cycles during the Reconstruction, progress in their military campaigns were often non-existent, particularly with its main adversary, the Humanist Alliance. However, the Hunter prototype would change the conflict between the two powers. Once the gear prototype had its secrets revealed to the Republic's scientists, full production went into the South's first gear, the Jaeger. With its unprecedented combination of mobility, armor, and firepower, the Jaeger proved to be the deciding factor in every engagement it took part in against the Humanist Alliance, forcing their surrender in a dramatically short amount of time. But the Southern Republic armies did not stop there, and proceeded to conquer the Mekong Dominion and Eastern Sun Emirates, thereby solidifying the Republic's control over the entire Southern Hemisphere. With their dominions secured, the Southern Republic moved on to create the Allied Southern Territories, or AST. On the surface, it may have seemed like a coalition of equals, but in actuality, the other Southern Leagues were practically vassal states of the Southern Republic, whose whims and desires dictated the course of the AST. The Northern Leagues initially dismissed the potential threat from the South, seeing them as nothing more than a puppet organization with no real strength behind it. However, this new power that began arising forced the attentions of the North away from warring with each other and onto a new potential enemy that could threaten their way of life. For the first time in countless cycles, the UMF, NLC, and WFP had common ground. Talks would quietly begin in the background between the three powers to form a similar union, but nothing ever seemed to come of them. That would change in TN 1686. The Mekong Dominion came into conflict with the United Mercantile Federation over a resource-rich area known as the West Ridge Trench. The UMF quickly found itself outnumbered and outgunned as the Dominion was able to bring the full military might of the South against them, the end results of which were disastrous for the UMF, who were forced to retreat back to the north. Despite the horrendous defeat, a valuable lesson was learned. Do not underestimate the Allied Southern Territories. The Protectorate and the Confederation, both witnesses to the annexation, took home this same lesson. Soon after, diplomatic negotiations began in earnest between the three leagues of the North. Individually, they could not challenge the armies of the South, but if they were unified, the future ambitions of the AST could be thwarted and their way of life preserved. And thus, in TN 1692, the Confederated Northern City-States, or CNCS, was born. Over the Terra Nova centuries, the North and the South would engage in a prolonged low-level conflict that would at certain points escalate drastically before simmering down again. Events such as the St. Vincent's War and the Sandstorm Strikes being notable flashpoints. As well, over this long course of time, both sides worked feverishly to expand their armies and technology. For example, by the dawn of the 1900s, gear technology had practically exploded with numerous gears covering a variety of roles from scouting to heavy fire support. When looking back with the perspective of history, this state of perpetual Cold War and need for military development was perhaps a crucial role in the defense of Terra Nova, when the Colonial Expeditionary Force of Earth began their invasion and kicked off what would be called the War of the Alliance. Earth had returned in force to reclaim the colony worlds for herself. In the long cycle since the withdrawal, the human concordat collapsed, and the entirety of the Sol system had devolved into an apocalyptic conflict simply known as World War III. When it was over, a new government emerged, the New Earth Commonwealth. But where humanity had recovered from one collapse, another was already brewing. World War III had brought Earth to ecological ruin, with NEC scientists estimating that the planet would be unsuitable for any kind of life within an astonishingly short amount of time. To guarantee their survival, the NEC government concluded, they had to take back the colony worlds they once abandoned, by force if need be. The future of their people allowed no other options. However, the Earth CEF did not know that the Terra Novans had been continuously developing their war-fighting capabilities for over 300 cycles. So when the CEF fleets began bombing their cities and landing over 400,000 of their ground forces, the CNCS and AST were quick to put aside their differences and commit fully to kicking the Earthers off their planet. The strength of their military counterattacks in space caught the CEF off guard, and their fleet was forced to divert away from Terra Nova, thus turning the conflict into a ground-based war until the fleet could return to replenish and resupply their troops on the surface. Between TN 1914 and 1916, the War of the Alliance would remain at a stalemate, despite the eventual return of the CEF fleet, or any offensive action undertaken by the Terra Novans. But a new player was about to enter the field and upend the game entirely: the city of Peace River. Peace River was a non-aligned city governed by the Paxton Arms Corporation, which was located in the equatorial desert Badlands. Peace River was able to stay independent from the other Terra Novan leagues due to Paxton's manufacture and selling of weaponry to both sides. When the CEF began their invasion, Peace River had openly declared their neutrality in the conflict, and while their fellow Terra Novans grumbled at such a middling stance, Both the Alliance and the Earthers honored their position in the war, but the Peace River leadership were not fools. They knew that Terra Nova had to be kept away from the NEC. This statement of neutrality was just a ruse to build up their army before they struck back at the forces of Earth, and by fall of TN 1916, Peace River declared their new position in the war by attacking the main CEF supply base in the Western Badlands. This new Third Front upset the balance of power in Terra Nova's favor. Caught between the Northern, Southern, and now Eastern fronts, the CEF began falling back deeper into the Badlands with the Terra Novans hot on their tails. And by the winter of TN 1917, the Alliance had surrounded their last holding in the Western Badlands, where the remaining CEF ground troops surrendered. The War of the Alliance had changed things for both Earth and Terra Nova. With a critical lack of troop transports, the CEF on Terra Nova were now forced to make their home amongst people who they had spent years trying to conquer. Then there was the reaction on Earth itself, who had initially dismissed the military capabilities of the Terra Novans, especially on their usage of gears. Earth would return one day, and when they did, they would use the lessons gained from the War of the Alliance to finally bring Terra Nova to heel. But as the old adage goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. While the previous war did bring together old, long-time enemies, the years after would see a degradation of North-South relations on Terra Nova until both hemispheres were locked into a low-scale war yet again. The future is uncertain, but the story of Terra Nova is far from finished.